Some props going on today. This will be fun, interesting. So we're going to be in First Peter. So we are continuing our study of First Peter, chapter 1. We're going to start in verse 13. So if you want to open up your Bibles or your apps to First Peter 1, that's where we're going to be. And as you guys turn there, you guys can see, check out my attire. I am wearing my vacation shirt this morning. So this is totally intentional, okay? I know the Rams are playing today, but I'm wearing my vacation shirt. A few weeks ago, we had a Spirit Week on campus. You know, they have these Spirit Weeks, and you dress certain ways on certain days. And one of the days that we had was wear what you wear when you go on vacation. And so I wore this shirt, kind of a very similar outfit. I think I wore my board shorts, and I think I had my sandals on. And it was funny because even though I was at work, I suddenly felt more relaxed. You know, I felt more ready to have fun. And it was simply because I was dressed the way that I would dress for a vacation. And it kind of put me into that mindset. And I honestly think that I did have a little bit more fun that day simply because of how I was dressed. I was in the mindset to have a vacation, to have fun. Isn't it funny how the way that we dress can affect how we think and how we feel? The way we dress can change sort of our whole mentality. You know, there's those sayings like dress for success, or the clothes make the man, or, you know, just different adages that, you know, it might feel outdated to us. And especially in California culture, because, you know, California culture, we're all about the casual. You know, here at the Vineyard, we pride ourselves on the fact that we can come to church dressed however, you know, the dress code is please do. You guys have heard that one, right? So it's like, it doesn't matter what you wear as long as you got something on. But there's something to be said for wearing our Sunday best, even. You know, those traditions where it's like you dress up for church because it puts you in the mindset of you're going to experience something special. Like you're going to meet with the Lord. You're going to celebrate a time with the Lord. And so when you dress for that, it's almost like you're preparing yourself for that. This is how Peter starts off this section of his letter. So starting in verse 13, and we're going to go through 21, but I'm just going to read the first few verses to start with. He says, "Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. But just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, 'Be holy, because I am holy.'" Now, I don't know about you, but when I read a passage like this, I immediately go to what's called behavior modification. When I hear words like obedient, holy, evil desires, you know, I start thinking, okay, it's up to me to change the way that I live. I need to get my act together. You know, it's all about discipline, moral discipline. If only I could be more disciplined, I think to myself, then I can get it right. And it's what I call the white knuckle approach. Has anybody ever heard of this? The white knuckle approach, okay? No matter what temptations get thrown my way, I'm gonna hold on with all my strength, you know, until your knuckles turn white. That's why it's called the white knuckle approach. And I'm gonna resist that temptation. And it works for about 5 minutes. Maybe, you know, on a good day. And then I end up giving into whatever temptation, you know, is at that moment. Can anybody else relate to me? Maybe. But what Peter is really talking about here is so much more than that. It's like the idea of me putting on my vacation shirt to get in the mindset of vacation. Another translation, the New Revised Standard, says, "Prepare your minds for action." So the NIV is really tricky because it has this, you know, with minds that are alert and fully sober. And it's almost like a preposition, right? It's a prepositional phrase, but it's actually a verb. It says, "Prepare your minds for action." And the New Revised Standard Version is a more literal translation of the Greek. So the actual Greek says, "Gird up the loins of the mind." Gird up the loins of the mind. So this is why I've got my props here this morning, because this is a term that is probably, we're like, what the heck, gird up the loins? This is This has to do with the way they used to dress, okay, back in the day. All right, I'm gonna do my best to kind of try to pull this off, okay? But back in the day, they wore really loose clothing, okay? Very loose fitting clothing, even the guys, okay? It wasn't a dress, kind of looked like one, okay? So they had their long robes going on like this, okay? And you'll notice, as I'm wearing this, it's like, you can only move around so much, right? You can't walk very well, If you were to try to do work, you're kind of constrained by it. So the term comes from the fact that when they would have work to do, or they had to maybe prepare for battle, the men would gird up their loins. And the idea is that they would take the back part. I'm gonna see if I can do this. I don't know if the material's loose enough. But they would take the back part and they would bring it up here like this. It's almost like a diaper. And they would wrap it up like that, okay? And so now, once you've got this whole thing, set like this, now you can move, you can fight, you can do what you need to do, okay? That's what it means to gird up the loins. So it actually has to do with kind of clothing. It has to do with how you dress. In a sense, Peter is saying, change your clothes. Change the clothes of your mind. Change your mindset. Put on the clothes that are going to help you remember who you are now. He goes on in verse 14, as obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. Even that word for conform, I'm going to throw this over here, skip this out of the way. Even that word for conform means assuming a similar outward expression. So don't dress like you used to. Don't put on the same old clothes that you wore when you didn't know any better, and you engaged in all sorts of behavior that wasn't good for you. Instead, remember who you are and dress the part. He then goes on to talk about holiness, verse 15 and 16. But just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, be holy because I am holy. I think what's challenging about passages like this is that we are limited to our English translation. And, our English, our understanding is based on our understanding of English because that's the language we know, but the Greek is the original form and it's not as simple. So that word for be here, where it says be holy, when it says be holy, is more closely related to the verb become. It has to do with a state of condition, a change of condition. It's both the state and the change at the same time. That's where Greek is so interesting because it's very complex and deep. So we may not act like we are holy sometimes, but we are. In reality, because of what Christ has done on the cross, because of what we just partook in with the Lord's Supper, we have been made holy. So the invitation is to embrace that change of condition, to embrace it, not as a white knuckle effort, but as a change of your mindset, the way that we think about and see ourselves. Isn't that interesting? So where it comes across as this moral discipline, get it together, he's really talking about getting your thinking right. Even the idea of holiness has been distorted in our culture. We think about people, what do you think about when you think about holy? Did you say?
No way.
No way, can't do it?
A nun.
A nun, good. Holier than thou. I think of, people that carry themselves off, and it's this list of do's and don'ts, and it's get it right, and in some sense they think they're better than other people because they get it right more of the time, at least on the surface. But holy means set apart. Holy means set apart. So something that is holy has been set apart for a special purpose. So at my house, my grandmother's china is holy. My grandmother's china is set apart. We do not use that every day for everyday things. It's very fragile. It's like that special china or whatever. So it gets put away and it's pulled out for special purposes. It gets used for special occasions. So what have we been set apart for? We have been made holy. We are called holy. So turn to your neighbor. I've been talking a lot already. What have we been set apart for? What is our purpose? So talk to somebody around you. What do you think? What have we been made holy for? What are we set apart for? All right, let's come on back. Let's go ahead and share. Share with me some of the things that you heard. You might share what your neighbor shared. Maybe share what you shared.
Being different when you don't want to be different.
Okay, being different when you don't want to be different. Just shout them out. What do you think? What is
Lifestyle.
lifestyle?
Or different lifestyle.
A different lifestyle. Okay. I heard all sorts of different answers. Just feel free to throw them out. Teaching. Okay. For God's love to shine through us. Any others? Let God use us. Yeah, Adam.
Yeah, I've kind of gotten something along those lines. Being called to help.
Called to help others. Okay, all of those are correct answers. What's the umbrella, though? The umbrella, the big thing that we've been set apart for, that all of that falls under. Worship with God or relationship with God. Right? In the big picture, when it all comes down to it, what we've been set apart for is relationship with God. We have been made holy to have intimate relationship with God, and everything else flows out of that. So the invitation to be holy is relational, not moral. I want to say that again. The invitation to be holy is relational, not moral. It's about being set apart to have an intimate relationship with God. And everything else flows from that. Now, where we struggle with holiness then is because we're not very good at relationships. And I'm going to call out the men in the room in particular, because I know that's true for me, okay? Our struggle with holiness is tied to our struggles to have deep, intimate relationships. And I would argue even that the moral crisis that we're facing in our nation is specifically tied to these relational deficits. We are not living our lives in the presence of God. We have forgotten that we are His people in this world. We get up every day, we put on the same old clothes, and we go about our business. We look past the clothes that God has set aside for us, the shiny new suit or beautiful dress that is hanging in the closet that has belongs to Jesus written on the back of it. Imagine putting on those clothes instead for just a moment. They're actually more comfortable than you would think. You put those clothes on, and now you are aware of God's affection for you. You are aware of His constant grace and mercy. You're tuned into that. You're constantly wondering, what is God thinking about me? And then you realize, oh, it's me. It's totally different. Abby, you want to share something?
Yes. When you were talking about the relation with God, if you gave it your all and you didn't hold back, what a great feeling that would be. To be yourself and to be whole with God and not hold back and show that this is what it's like to be in His grace.
It's freedom, isn't it? Yep. It's freedom.
And not care about what this is going on out here.
Yeah.
Just shine.
Yeah.
What a great feeling that would be. Someday I'm going there.
For sure. We all do. We're all working that way. Another analogy for me is it reminds me of those matching shirts that couples wear when you go to Disneyland. You ever see those couples walking around and it says, I'm with her, I'm with him? You know that? It's like holiness is like that idea. We're wearing the matching shirts with Jesus. I'm with Him. We're set apart. Doesn't that change something? Doesn't that now just affect not only how you feel, but how you think? And then as it changes how you think, doesn't that affect the choices that you make? I'm with him. It changes our focus completely. Suddenly God has our attention, and we know that he has ours too. That's really what holiness is all about. We're set apart for relationship with God. We are his, and he's ours. Intimacy is something that I have been on a long journey to grow in, because I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional household relationally. I've shared some of that with you. And so it's something that I've really had to work on and had to think a lot about. And when you boil it down to its simplest form, intimacy is about giving someone your full attention. Just think about like staring into your spouse's eyes, and just holding their gaze, and that full attention. That's intimacy at its simplest form. But the problem is that we have so many things distracting us every day, every moment, pulling our attention off the one who makes all the difference. So we need to dress for who we are. We need to put on the matching t-shirts every day and let the Lord do the transforming work that he wants to do in us. It's not about moral formation. Moral formation is where we are doing the work. It's about spiritual formation, where God, through the power of the Holy Spirit, is doing the transforming work in us. The rest of this passage emphasizes this mindset, particularly for the people of this time. You remember Luke set us up with the history, right? That they're exiles and they're facing some incredible persecution. So as we continue to read the passage, just think about that, okay? So verse 17, since you call on a Father who judges each person's work impartially, live out your time as foreigners here in reverent fear. Can I get some other translations? Somebody have a different translation? Want to read it out? Nice and loud. That was the NIV.
If you call upon him as your Father who judges each one impartially according to what he does, then you should conduct yourselves with true reverence throughout the time of your temporary residence on the earth, whether long or short.
Great. We may see this idea of God's judgment as a fearful thing. That's the Amplified, right? Yeah.
All the extra words.
Did you want to read another one, Adam?
Yeah. And remember that the Heavenly Father, to whom you pray, has no favorites. He will judge or reward you according to what you do. So you must live in reverent fear of him during your time here as temporary residents.
So it's this idea of God being a judge. And I think in our modern mindset, we hear that and that kind of scares us. We think of the idea of God as a judge as a fearful thing. But think about it for these people at this time who are facing a judgment from the society in which they live in. So they're facing a judgment of persecution and death. This would be comforting to remember that God is the judge. God is the one who judges. That would be an incredibly comforting thing. You don't have to be afraid of anything this world throws at you because this is not your home. This is a temporary residence, like Adam's translation or somebody's translation says. And who do we belong to? Him. We're his. So those are comforting words, even though they come across as like, wait a second, we're being judged. No, the reminder is, who are we? We belong to God, and He is watching over us, and He is judging everything that is happening around us. Okay, this is not about like making the mark or measuring the mark. And then he goes on, verse 18, for you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. He was chosen before the creation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. Through him you believe in God, who raised him from the dead and glorified him, and so your faith and hope are in God. The key word here is redeemed. Some of your translations might say ransomed. Do some of you guys have the translation ransom? So, a ransom is to restore something back to its proper owner. So when someone is ransomed in a kidnapping, it means you are willing to pay any price to get them back. God paid this price not with silver or gold, the most precious things that they had materially at this time, but with something even more precious, the blood of Jesus. Jesus was the perfect sacrificial lamb who takes away the sins of the world, and we were bought back to our rightful owner. We actually have always belonged to Jesus, right? He created us. He's the creator. But we were kidnapped somewhere along the way. Isn't that a really interesting way to think about kind of the brokenness of our world and the sin of our world? It's like we were kidnapped, and like a lot of captives, we began to have our thinking corrupted by our surroundings. And our corrupt thinking led to corrupt behavior. It's like that Helsinki syndrome or something, right? Where you begin to agree with the people that have captured you. The invitation here is to reset our thinking, to remember who we are and whose we are. So we need to dress the part every day because the clothes help us remember. Just like my vacation shirt helps me remember, I'm here to have fun, right? It's like we need to put on those matching t-shirts with Jesus. Just every time we wake up, put it on. I'm with him. And then we grow in our awareness of God's presence in our life. I believe we'll start to see a difference. So we're going to just close with just some time to change clothes. I think really the ministry call is pretty clear. Kirsten, if you can come on back up. I think we should keep seeing the new wine song in the pressing. I feel like that's really like God is making new wine, right? This new awareness that he wants to bring into our lives is that we belong to him. What we see around us, it's a distortion. There's a lot of distractions. And so Jesus this morning, I think, is inviting us to have a new intimacy with him, a way in which we kind of fix our eyes on his and know he's looking right back at us. And yes, it's imperfect. We don't get it right. But the more we grow in that, the more freedom we have, the more joy we have, the more holiness we have experience. Let's sing a little bit of that song, and then we can just kind of pray to close.
In the pressing, in the pressing,